Hey everybody, welcome back to Sergeant's Talk TV. I'm Big Mike.
Normal size Jason.
That's right. Hey
Uh,
guys, we got a good one for you tonight. We're going to talk about stories from the Sandbox.
oh
Uh,
man.
and it's not going to be one of those, death and gory and all this kind of stuff, but there's a lot of stupid stuff and silly stuff and things you go, what? That happens on deployments. Jason Jason laughs right off the get go because it's true.
You know
Soldiers,
the
Marines, airmen, they do dumb stuff.
they do. Hold on. We're just not normal. Okay, that's much better for me. My eyeballs couldn't do the crisscross because you stepped out for a minute before we went live, and I'm like, I can't do it. It's just not normal. Um.
I had to go
Oh
to the latrine.
yeah. I thought it was for the longest time. I thought it was a Marine only thing, and
Yeah,
the saying was, if you leave a Marine alone for more than 5 minutes, they will find a rock of one way, shape, or form, and it doesn't matter. You could be in a clean surgical room that's been sanitized, and there's no way to get any dirt in there. They find a rock and they're gonna throw it at something.
yeah,
Now I'm finding out that that was just a military thing. It wasn't just Marines that find a way to find rocks.
yeah. I mean, I will tell you that we deployed in late August of 90, and we had just finished up 45 days of gunnery for the division at Grafenwehr, Germany. We did 45 days there, and then we road marched every last one of our vehicles, tanks, everything from there down to Hohensfeld, Germany, which is probably an 8 hour road march because of the tanks and all that stuff, right? And you're going so slow, you're like, your head's about to snap off and stuff like that because it's so boring.
Now
Uh,
these now you're talking about road march, and these were the old M60s.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
we were just getting the Abrams, but we still had, because I was with an engineer battalion, and we had the only tanks we had were the old M60s with the cut off barrels because we shot those bunker busters
Oh
out
yeah.
of that thing. It lobbed it like a watermelon.
Well, and
Uh,
they topped out. That was the thing that people didn't know back in the day was they're like, man, we road marched with tanks and it took forever. And it's like, but their top speed of those old M60s, if you had one tuned right, like and you had to know all the systems, was 28 miles an hour.
yeah,
Like
I
that was
mean,
the very fastest. Like they were most of them were governed to about 20.
yeah, and it was horrible. And then if one of them broke down, and it was, and then you had the big M88s, 880s that had the tow truck tank, and they had to take them with them. But anyway, so we did that, and then we went down to Hohensfeld for force on force training. That was another 45 days. And just when we finished, we just got off the war track, hell broke loose. And they froze everybody in place in Hohensfeld. And well, no, I was the second time I was there with the engineer. I was with 411, 11th ACR. And then out of the entire regiment, I was with the attack helicopter squadron. We were the only ones that deployed all the helicopters. We deployed, and then the rest of the regiment went back to Fulda, Germany, railheaded everything and sent it all back down there. But we went over there, and I'm going to tell you something. It was then when I got on the ground over there, all of a sudden a message came out. They said, "Hey, they need a senior non-commissioned officer for a smoke platoon. Okay. And because I was an MP the first part of my career. And then the second part of my career, when I came back in, because I had a small break in service because of an accident that happened to me. And they had retired me off of active duty because they said I'd never run again. And then 8 months later or 9 months later, I went back to the recruiter because I was lost as a civilian. And then I went back and they made me do a PT test and all that stuff. And they said, come on back in. But the only thing they let me be, I went to the chemical MOS. And so they needed a smoke platoon sergeant. And so then I went with them. But when we were in the desert, the dumb things that's happened, the funny things that happen, you know, we're going to talk about all those things, what led up to us getting deployed, how we got deployed, the medical part of getting deployed. We're going to talk about it all. It's going to be, hands free. We're going to talk about it. There's no rules on it. And it's not going to be about weapon systems. It's not going to be about plans. It's not going to be about anything like that, battle plans or nothing like that. Just dumb things that we saw, the things that we experienced, the training that we had to do, the long hour, day after day training before we even LD, line of departure, before we went into Iraq, all this stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We do have somebody. We got Gunny Holly down there. You know him. I'm going to bring him up anyway.
I might know this guy.
Yeah. And I think his speaker is off.
Unmute yourself, Unc. Let's see. Nope, I can't do it.
I can't do it either. He's got to unmute himself.
You're muted somehow. There you go.
Okay.
There's too many buttons for this here jarhead.
There you go. So that's what we're going to do. But before we do that, we're going to say hello to some people that are trying to pay the bills. I say trying to. Oh, man, I got to go all the way up here. I know that Dawn came in here first at our flipping farmstead. Our favorite female Marines in here. There's Debbie Droth. How are you doing?
See Neil S made it in the house. Good to see you, Neil.
Now, before I seen Tim Mason pop up down there, but he went away for some reason.
Well, I think that might have been my little BFF Stella. She's in there working with Tim and Dana, and she's like, I want to see my Mr. J. So hi, Stella.
Yeah,
not too long, sweetheart.
Dana, she's here. Judy Herman's here.
Oh, wait. We're getting moderated at the mostest moderation you could ever be moderated.
That's right. There's Jesse over there. Lazy days ahead. Good to see you, Jesse. He's an Army veteran. And there's Charlie Renee. Is it Charlie and Renee or Charlie Renee Boggs from North Carolina?
Wow.
Is that your Charlie?
That is our Charlie.
That is my Charlie.
Okay. I see North Carolina. I go, wait, Charlie? Yeah. Let's see. There's your buddy over there at Veterans Landing. Ricky Smith's here.
There's Ricky. Matter of fact, Ricky doesn't even know it. And I was going to message him earlier, but Ricky, we were heading to town earlier and passed right by him. He was heading, I know he was heading home, the direction he was going. He was going back to Veterans Landing, but he must have to do some town running today.
There's Kevin over there with Hiking with Jackie Boy. He's in here.
There's Robin at Annabore at Good Enough Homestead.
There you go. Ace is here. Hello, Ace. Tony at Our Cabin in the Woods is here.
It is, and I know I'd seen a comment earlier that I don't know if she's popped in since then, but Angie was on her phone with her dad, so she's not in here right now. But
Yeah.
I know she'll be in here as soon as she can.
Yeah. There's Glenn and Shannon Salty Life. Rolling, rolling, rolling.
Always got the cadence.
He's got the cadence. Let's
everybody
down.
say hi to everybody. What else do we got? There's a Nona Milton.
Hey, Nona. Good to see you. She's saying hello, fam. Oh, there's Bobby and Eddie Jean River.
There's Brother Bobby.
Yep.
See, Denise McDonald made it in.
Hello, hello. I'm scrolling.
I'm trying to. Got to scroll and read. There's Kevin Dietz. Says,
Hey.
good evening, guys.
How you doing, Kevin? You scroll faster than me. Hey, David B.
Well, that's because I don't need extra eyeballs. So you're
That's true.
Yeah.
Philip W. Ryder's here. Hello, veteran CB in the house.
Speaking of, we have to take a pause out a minute, guys.
Ooh.
Big Mike started out tonight. He didn't need his eyeballs in. His ears are already on, and he didn't have to mute anything as soon as we went live.
Right?
It's a monumental night tonight.
Yep. And it's not even raining. All right. So I think I'm at the bottom.
There's Brother Philip Ryder made it in. Says, Semper Fi to me and Uncle, Gunny Holly. We'll go in.
Gunny. Yeah.
I got to respect my elders.
So I'm going to kick this off. Now, I will tell you that the last numbers that I seen from Desert Storm, we got there in August and we stayed until we thought we were going to go home after the 100-hour conflict. And then they told us that our brigade was going to stay behind. And if you've seen the thumbnail, when we got left behind, because I was in it, like I said, I went back. The unit that I was supporting as a smoke platoon sergeant, they deployed back. I went back to my aviation squadron, and then when we were there, because I worked in the S3 there as the chemical operations officer, we had a detail. We got some orders come down, said, hey, we need somebody to be a door gunner on a Black Hawk for a VIP mission. And I said, well, heck, I've been in a 113, a smoke vehicle, for the last months, and I would love to go get some flight time and see what everything looks like, afterwards, rather than, seeing to your left and right and you're on the ground and you're spitting up sand and picking out the proverbial dust booger, how that got over there where your nose was just clogged up with sand and stuff.
I still think when I blow my nose today, I'm getting sand between Iraq and Afghanistan. It's still coming out.
So I said, hey, I'll do it. And they go, oh, okay. We've been living without you anyway, so go ahead. And so come to find out, the mission was to fly General Schwarzkopf around, the commander of forces over there, on a farewell goodbye. And he went to all the outlying base camps and all that stuff. So we flew him around for about a week. And the story I'm going to tell you was my interaction with him. We took a picture together, and that was the picture, and it was in stars and stripes on the front page and all that stuff. And somebody had given me a copy of that, and it was like in a pole. Actually, it was just a picture that Stars and Stripes took, and then it ended up in Usura magazine, and then that picture came off of Usura magazine, and of course I scanned it and put it onto my Facebook page and all that stuff. So I've had that thing since 1991. And so it's not really a great picture now because it faded a little bit or whatever. So it's a scanned copy of a magazine. And so, but I still have the original Stars and Stripes that it was in. So we had the detail, and we were flying around, and we got back to Doha. And from Doha, we were going to fly him straight to Riyadh, where he was going to fly out of. So we landed there, and every time he got out of the bird, he took his steel pot off, set it on the seat in the Black Hawk, and he always put on his softball cap. So he got out, and he took his flak vest off and put it in there and stuff like that. So his flak vest was on the ground. So I said, well, I'm going to pick his flak vest up and put it in the seat. And I seen it, and there was in one of the pockets in the front of it, there was like 5 cigars in there, and they're plastic wrapper and stuff. And I said on the thing, we were all joking around, the pilots and crew chief and all of us. We were sitting there talking around, and I put a steel pot on my head with the 4 stars, and I got one of his cigars out, and I started doing, because he always says, some of the stuff he said was just, I use some of those even today, dumber than a rock, or, like a pig looking at a wristwatch, and all kinds of stuff. He said all kinds of stuff. So I had the cigar, and I had it in my mouth. I said, "Oh, you sons of bitches," blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, I thought he was gone. And he walked back over to the bird, and I didn't see him. And I was doing this, and he stood there in the doorway, and I looked over, and I go, "Oh," he goes, "That was some funny stuff. And when I get back, we're going to talk about this," right? This is the commander of forces in Iraq, all right? And I'm just like going, oh my gosh. And then that's when he said, we need to take a picture. And he made me put on my boonie cap, right? Because he had his softball cap on. And I'm a little bit taller than he is. So the reason why we were smiling like that was because he had grabbed the back of my utility belt and was pushing down, so I wasn't taller than him. And he said, "Smile, you sons of bitch." And that's when they took the picture of us over in the desert. And, then we flew out and stuff. He goes, "I ain't mad at you," and stuff like that. But when we get to Riyadh, you're going to clean my helmet. So I had to break his helmet down, wash it all out, and stuff like that. He goes, "I don't know what you got in your head," and blah, blah, blah. And so that thing right there, every time I see that picture, I remember every moment leading up to that picture. And it was for me, being a non-commissioned officer, that was a big thing because he was so real. He loved soldiers. He would chew out officers like that's nobody's business. But when it come to enlisted, he was a soldier's general, and I'll leave it at that. And when you're alone with them and they're upset, and you get to hear the angry side of people, and he wasn't angry at people, he was angry at the dumb things that happened. For example, before we LD'd, before we went into Iraq, we were still in KKMC.
Yeah.
Before we left there, 143 service members died because of accidents. We had one in our unit. They told you when you get on top of a armored vehicle, it's 3 points of contact. Okay. But of course, the comms guy, he was jumping from vehicle to vehicle because you park them, just so you can get a body in between them. And he was jumping from one to one. He jumped across and there was a camouflage poles that somebody had thrown up on top. They hadn't bundled them up yet or anything like that. And his heel hit one and he fell backwards. And you know that those metal braces that go around the antenna base to protect the antenna base on an armored vehicle?
Yeah.
Hit back of his head, planted right on top of that, and it killed him. And it's just accident and accident, no ground guide, somebody backing into somebody, all kinds of stuff happened. Sleeping where you weren't supposed to sleep, and they were walking vehicles in the middle of the night, and they ran over somebody in a sleeping bag, or he was sleeping so he didn't get the dust. One guy was sleeping in a sleeping bag between two vehicles. They fired it up, and they were moving it somewhere. And when they pivoted, it just crushed him into the other vehicle because they didn't clear all four sides of the vehicle before they moved it offline and stuff
And
like that.
I think that, when you think back, like any loss in those environments is bad.
Yeah.
But I think the worst one that I'd heard about, at least in the Iraq portion of it, when we went in 2003, was literally something like that where it was an accident.
Yeah.
And it could have been prevented and should have been prevented. And I'm not talking bad any way, shape, or form about the reserve units because they serve their point and purpose.
Yeah.
But it just so happened that we got supplemented by a company of reservists.
Mhm.
And before anything even kicked off, we were out doing some weapons training, doing stuff. Well, yeah, we lost our first guy because of negligence.
Right.
They were out trying to supposedly clear a weapon, and not at a fault of them of being reservists, but they're not as trained as well. They're not doing it day in and day out. They're there for one weekend a month, and yeah, they cleared a weapon system, but unfortunately, there was a guy standing right in front of it, and it wasn't cleared.
Yeah.
And it went off. Like they didn't clear it properly. And yeah, we were like, well, we've been here for 2 weeks and already have a loss. Like, but so, the negligence of some of the people not paying enough attention definitely made it rough. But
well,
I don't have any Desert Storm stories because, well, as the kid of the group tonight, I wasn't old enough to go through there.
Yeah.
But I know Brother Mike, Gunny Holly's got some good stories from Desert Storm because, well, he was right there with you. If you'll unmute his mic and we can hear him talk.
Yeah. Got to unmute that mic. There you go.
There he goes.
There we go.
We're waiting on you, Gunny.
Yeah, we need to hear that good because it's before my time. So I can't tell Desert Storm stories. We haven't moved that far along in the timeline.
Oh, I had the honor and privilege of going over there with Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
They were the only ones that had any combat experience.
Right.
We didn't. And when we got over there, they were pretty relaxed. We were a bunch of kids scared to death. We didn't know what was going on. We never did.
Yeah.
We made a lot of dumb mistakes.
Oh, I know because when you have it, you're training up or you're getting ready. an accident happens, what's the first thing that happens? They have a safety stand down. And if you think about it, 145 times they call a safety stand down to talk about, and somebody will be, they go and train the trainers. You get all the information. Senior non-commissioned officer or the platoon leader will set everybody down, and you'll start talking about that and doing a safety stand down, hoping that soldiers will learn from that you can kill yourself or you can get seriously injured, and hopefully you've given them enough stuff to mitigate doing those dumb things. Then somebody does something totally different and you have another safety stand down and you go over everything that happened there. Hopefully you'll mitigate that. But there was only a couple of instances where the same accident repeated itself, you know? And then of course you go in there as senior non-commissioned officers or junior officers, company commanders, and you get read the riot act. You know, this has happened again. You SOB, blah, blah, and it goes, you know, things that would get you fired because your leadership, you just got to stand there and take it. Even though it didn't happen to your unit, didn't happen to your platoon, nothing like that, you still got to take the tongue lashing that comes with trying to get the point across about safety. Yeah, you're getting ready to lock and load and go into combat and stuff like that. But the fastest way to be a leader and get relieved of duty is an accident. And then if you have a repeat accident, that's just the knife, you know, the knife in your chest. You're done. Okay. Or somebody gets medevaced out because of a heat injury.
Well, remember, those people that get injured, whether it's just routine training or whatever, they don't get replaced.
No.
You're in a hurt.
Well, I will tell you that we did get replacements, but all of our replacements were either National Guard or they were reserves. Okay. Those two things, they were backfilling, because if you got deployed, because a lot of people got deployed certain MOSs. So before you deploy, the commander has to say, these are my shortfalls. I'm not at 100%. So you might need a commo guy, you might need a couple of mechanics, you might need this because you're short of those, or you got people in the rear with the gear because they made themselves non-deployable, which is basically a career ender. Okay, making yourself non-deployable.
We
So
didn't have that privilege to have accidents. We did.
Yeah,
we lost the body, even temporarily. We lost the body.
Yeah,
nothing on our part we could do about it.
Yeah,
yeah, and I think that
something happened.
Well, he was there for a minute. Hold on, we gonna get Brother Philip in here?
He froze up or something happened.
I think that, you know, in honestly, it was, you know, we were just recently over at my uncle's house there in North Carolina, and you get talking about stories. I mean, you know, veterans get together, and especially Marines. I mean, I had, you know, my uncle there, my cousin there. You know, they served around the same time as each other. You know, and then me coming in later on, the next generation coming in. So I heard a lot of stories of what it was like for them, especially in Desert Storm or, you know, just the Marine Corps before that.
Right.
And so Iraq kicks off, you know, 2003. We're going over for the initial push to take over Baghdad, and you know, we're tanks. We're supposed to lead the element. Well, we get over in country, and they're like, well, now we've got, you know, scouts in these light armored vehicles. They're going to go up and clear the routes beforehand, and well, that didn't work out for them. Like we were getting losses left and right because they were sending all these light skinned vehicles up there. So they finally decided tanks were going to lead the element. And I was like, all right, and now mind you, I'm a mechanic. So the tanks are still in front of us. We're always right there behind them, but not necessarily in the fighting force unless you had to. And we're following along, we're getting up in there. Well, every company has a master gunner.
Right.
They're the ones, they're the ultimate weapons duty expert guy. And we're prepping our vehicles to go over there. And I'm a sergeant. Yeah, what do I know, right? I've been in for 5 minutes. I got promoted as sergeant. I'm good to go. And I get this comm chief. I'm a driver of a Humvee, and I get a comm chief as my A driver. And my job was to drive him around. So, I carried some parts in the back that if the tanks needed fixed, we could get them up. But then he was there to keep radio communication up. And this guy was a hoot. Like I don't know how he made it through it, but he did. Well, we have this master gunner, that weapons expert. He's seen it, right? He's been in a while. He was a gunny. He's been doing this. Like, this guy's hardened. He knows. And the first engagement we got into was fire from way beyond what the weapons capabilities were. We really weren't in any danger. Looking at the situation, like, hey, I'm watching the rounds hit 100 yards, 200 yards in front of us. They can't even travel that far, but we can't find them to be able to tell everybody that is trying to fire back beyond their weapons capabilities to cease fire. And we found him hugging his machine gun that he wouldn't let the gunner take in a tank ditch. He's like, get down, they're firing. And we're like, yeah, we know, we're standing here, we're watching them hit way in front of us. Do you want to give us some guidance? And through this whole evolution of prepping up to it, he's given us classes and we're supposed to be learning from him. And he's our senior guide on what we're supposed to do in an engagement. And now he's laying in a fighting hole, hugging one of the few machine guns. It was a 240. It wasn't anything impressive, but he's still hugging it. Hey, we could have used that. And next thing you know, we come out of that and we start moving on. Well, then he has to pull out the Rambo. He's got to grab the rounds out of the ammo cam, sling them over him. And he carried the name Tackleberry for the rest of the deployment. Because anybody that's watched the old Police Academy movies, you had old Tackleberry in there, sir, yes, sir. And that was that guy until it really hit the fan. And then he was laid under a vehicle or behind the biggest thing you could see. And so we get to this engagement and we get marched down the road even further. And next thing you know, they're calling maintenance up because we have a gun tube barrel on the tank that is inoperable. Well, that's no good. What happened? Well, the heat over there, the rounds actually, if you left them in the gun tube too long, they would swell and you couldn't get them out. Well, his brilliance said, we're going to take this big chunk of wood, this tree we found, and ram it like a barrel cleaner in the end of the gun barrel. Well, the end of the round is pointed. So now he just created a major wedge and totally disabled this entire tank.
Yeah.
And yet tried to blame it. Well, you guys shouldn't have. That wasn't our fault. We didn't ram wood down the end of this barrel. How is this our fault? And they had to take. That was the biggest explosion I'd ever seen, because they had to pull that gun tube off, take it out to a safe location, and EOD came out. And the only way to get rid of that round and get it out of there, because now it's wedged in from both ways, was to basically blow it up in place.
Yeah.
And it's just, I realized then that some of those guys that you really thought you were able to count on, you got to be careful, because when stuff starts whizzing by you, you really find the character of who you're around and who's supposed to be your leadership.
And I will tell you that there were quite a few people that surprised me in two different ways. Somebody you thought, well, you were in garrison and you're training and you're doing all this stuff, man, they're going to excel when it comes to combat.
Yeah.
And they were worthless as, tits on a hog, and then you got these guys, you say, man, this is my problem child. And guess what? When it came into combat or any situation, those were the guys that excelled. Now, there are some guys that were dirtbags. They were still dirtbags. Every time we had a incoming scud, there was always that one guy. Everybody's going to mop and masking up, and and then there was one joker. Every time it happened, he would go hide and wouldn't put on anything. Because you didn't know, and we learned later when Saddam gassed all the Kurds and killed all of them, they actually had stuff in theater. We just didn't find it until after the war ended. Because I went on a follow-up when they had the no-fly right after the Gulf. We went back and I was with the aviation again, and we were flying all over that place. And I've got a foot locker full of pictures from there, because I had all these, we didn't have all these cell phones and all this garbage back then. I had those little Kodak cameras, that had like 12 pictures on one. And if you were lucky, there was one, I had a couple of them that had 36, and you were just collecting them, put them in your foot locker and saving them. So when you went back and stuff, back to the rear, and so you could develop them at the PX and get all your pictures back. And little did I know that people actually seen those things, and someone knocked on my door, and it was a couple of people from MPI, military police investigators. They came in there and said, "Hey, are you Sergeant First Class Elmer?" And I said, "Yeah." And they go, "Yeah, we need to talk to you." And they opened up their briefcase, and they had all these packets of pictures, and they already had them segregated. He goes, "Did you take these pictures?" And I said, "Well, I'm guessing I did." And he goes, "Well, somebody contacted us from where AAFES has them developed and stuff like that. Because we did get briefed. You can't take things. You can't take out of country pictures of dead bodies and all kinds of stuff." Well, when I'm in the air, we're flying over the Basra Highway after the war. I'm just snapping pictures left and right, because it's so much better from the air than it is on the ground. So yeah, I got in a little trouble at that, and they said, "Well, disobeying a written regulation, because when you're leaving country, you have customs inspections of all your connexes." Even though some units put Iraqi vehicles in their freaking Connex and shipped them back to Germany. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, that was the hard part. Like, even being in Iraq, like luckily I never had anybody come knock on the door and be like, "Hey, you took pictures of stuff you weren't supposed to." But I did the same thing. The old 35 millimeter film and the disposables, you have those because it wasn't a thing to have the digitals at the time. At least not me in my budget.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be there. And I mailed them all home, and I had my wife take them in and, "Hey, go develop these." and then you can kind of look through. But I was like, just develop them. Don't even worry about it till I get home, and I'll explain. And I got home, and yeah, maybe half the photos had actually got developed. They wouldn't need some of them. They refused. And when you looked at the negatives, they actually cut the photos. Of course, I had her take them to what was it, Walmart or Walgreens at the time in a military base, town. So it made sense that they pulled it out. But I was like, there was stuff that maybe if I would have, left the film and then waited and went somewhere outside of that, you could have got it done. But
so then so that happened to me, but I still had camera after camera that I didn't have developed because the lady said it would cost this much money. I said, man, I'll just wait and do some each month. So I never had those developed until I was back in the United States and stuff. And Walmart doesn't call anybody, so they don't care what you put on the picture. So one of the things I really disliked about there was when you're building base camps, right? You got base camps, and the Red Horse team came into the one we were at, and they built in their manual, there's an actual plans for a shower with a big tank that they paint black, because if you're in the desert and it's 130 degrees, you got hot water when you put in the truck, come by and fill them up and stuff. And everybody was waiting in line. When they seen the truck, they were running to the shower. And then you've got the latrines that they built for you. And underneath the latrine, you have cut 55-gallon steel drums underneath there for the drop through.
Mm-hmm.
Well, platoons were on rotation at the base camp when you've got SST duty, which is called shit sucking detail, right? And that's where you have to pull the drums out from underneath, okay? And you got to, hopefully you don't splash stuff all over yourself, because number one and number two's in the bucket, right? We didn't have that blue stuff, and it was just raw sewage, and they had to pull those out. And then you had a big burn barrel, and you had to put sand and diesel in there, and you had to light that stuff. And then they gave you a mop handle, okay? An M1 mop handle, and you had to stir. Well, we were there it was in our second month. All of a sudden they said, your platoon's got SST duty. And all 30 of my guys, my lieutenant, well, he didn't do nothing, but anyway, we were on the detail. Of course, you got to be with them. And I was one of those guys. I went right alongside. I took my turn with the stir stick. And all they would give you were these little cheap cloth masks with the little metal thing right there. And
you had a mask?
We ripped those off because it was so hot. That thing got so hot, that little piece of metal.
Yeah.
So we took those off. So you got it there, and you still got the smell, and you're stirring and you got to stir it down. Keep stirring it down. And then when you get to a certain pot where the solid waste was dehydrated, so you took that and poured it into another container. And then that container, the Kuwaitis would come and pick those up and take them. But I'm going to tell you something. I dry heaved for a freaking week. that was the worst thing, other than that skunk out here that I had to get out of the chicken house. It was probably that was the worst detail I had ever been on in my entire life.
And it's funny you bring that up, because that was probably one of the funniest moments that I had in that deployment in 03 to Iraq, because my gunny, the maintenance chief, was not the master gunner one. He was actually the maintenance chief.
Yeah.
He was in long enough. He'd been in Desert Storm, and so we got there. Well, typically that duty was held to like the E3 and belows, like whatever company was assigned it. Hey, you send your E3 and belows over, and they're gonna take care of it. Well, our number came up for our company to go represent, and Gunny looked at us and he said, "Good. I'm glad we finally got our chance. All of the NCOs, the corporals and sergeants, we're not sending the Lance Corporal and belows over. My NCOs are going to take care of it." And it was one of those like, what? And he's like, "I had to burn shit and stir shit in Saudi. You're doing it."
Yeah.
And you would have thought you just sent a group of 10-year-olds to Chuck E. Cheese. We went over and was like, you know what? It's horrible. It's nasty. Somebody's got to do it. We were dancing around it. Like, we had a couple guys that could sing. They're singing. We labeled them. They were all the honey pots.
Yeah, the honey pots.
The honey pots. So we had guys with some spray paint. They decorated like each can with a different color design, like had some artwork on it. We're pouring a diesel. I didn't know about the sand thing. We didn't pour sand. We just and we
well,
also,
the sand actually holds the diesel better, so it burns longer, and the abrasion breaks up the submarines.
huh. Well, we didn't get that luxury. We didn't have sand. We just had diesel.
Dude, you had a whole desert.
Well, nobody told us that sand was an option. Yeah, I mean, we're lost. This is the first time we've got to burn shit and stir it with a stick to make it disappear.
Yeah, this is something they don't teach you in high school.
Yeah, that was not in any of our training up until this point in our career. And we just and I remember the battalion commander had come by and he's like, "What are you all doing?" And we're like, "Well, we're burning the shit, sir." And he's like, "But you're having way too much fun." It was like, well, at this point, how do you not make it fun? Like you it's miserable. Why sit here and be miserable doing it? Enjoy yourself. So, we poured all the diesel on, we lit it, and we're just stirring around. We're doing little like rain dances around it. Dudes are singing. Like, you would have thought that you just watched a bunch of kids experience Chuck E. Cheese for the first time, and we're burning shit. And it was like, we've got to do it. Like it's got to be done. So, and I carry that whole mantra, and I still carry it to this day. Like, why get mad about the situation you're in? Or, hey, somebody gave me a duty and this is really, shitty, and all pun intended. Find a way to make it fun.
Yeah.
Because if everybody's miserable, the job still has to be done. So why not enjoy doing it, even though it sucks?
Yeah.
And that was he thought he was punishing us, and we came back and he's like, "I hate every one of you." And we're like, "Why?" He's like, no, that was supposed to be like a punishment, a miserable task, and the entire camp just seen you all having fun doing it. And it was NCOs. So like when the Lance Corporals and stuff come up, they're like, these guys are, and it didn't make the job any better, but it's like, why be miserable? And if we can do it and we can make it fun, then just get it done. It's got to go somewhere.
Yeah. So I will tell you that I seen someone sing about MoGas. We did have a guy that come out there and said, "Hey, you just want to put a little drop of MoGas in there to get it started because diesel, it's the fumes that will get everything started." And of course, that wasn't my platoon; it was another platoon, but we all had the briefing. And all of a sudden, the first people that went out there, they put the diesel in there. They put a little bit of sand in there, and then the guy took one of those smaller coffee cans full of MoGas and poured it in there. The stink won't kill you, but when you take something and you light MoGas and the fumes are off-gassing, and all of a sudden there was somebody that took pictures. These guys, they were standing there, and their platoon sergeant was giving them a class on this, and he poured the MoGas into the pot, and then he took a match and had a stick with some cloth wrapped around it and started that. And he goes, "Okay, and then you put it inside there, guys. Now listen to me. Boom. And you've got a pot full of crap and urine, and MoGas explodes because fumes explode,
Right.
not the gas. And there had to be 16 people covered in dookie. Okay. And I'm like going, yeah, we're not doing this. Okay. Unless somebody wants to volunteer, we're all going back over here to get it started. And the one guy said, no, what you're supposed to do is take the MoGas and put it on the rag and then drop the rag into the diesel because it won't explode. And you drop it in there and it will start the diesel up. He put a coffee can full of MoGas in there. And I mean, it was like, you've seen it like with brush piles and stuff where it goes, boom, like that. And I mean, these boys were covered in it. So they made all these guys, and they didn't have masks on at the time. They made all these guys go and they took them off the detail, and they had to get the hepatitis B series. And it's 3 different shots on, and you got to get them in like one day, and then 2 days later you get the second one, and then so many weeks later or whatever you get the third.
I'm just blown away that you got masks. That wasn't an option for us. We
had the mask because we had the oil well fires, and because when everybody was leaving and stuff, the other detail was to stand out there at a distance. But when the wind shifted and all that smoke from the oil well fires came in, I mean, it was just dripping off you when you came back in. And then we had to take our uniforms, turn them in. They said, turn them in, and they'll send them out to a laundry unit and get them all done. Well, when they take them out there, they give you this net bag. Okay. And you put all your clothes in there. And so you put your tag on it and stuff like this. And you give it to them. It goes back and it comes back. Well, it's got most of it off, but it's all stained because I didn't know this. They take the bag and they throw it in these big industrial washers on these trailers. They don't take them out and do everybody separate. They leave them in the bag, and they tell you can only have so many pieces of pants in there, or the blouse top and underwear and stuff. I mean, I wore white boxers. I had boxers and stuff like that, and they were all oil based from being washed. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? And then of course we got them all exchanged when we got back to the rear. But yeah, that's the only reason why we had masks. And those things were just like soaked. Okay. They were absolutely soaked. Oh, there he is.
There's Philip.
What's going on, man? I heard you had a story.
Yeah, I got a story.
All right, I want to hear it. You got something else on. I hear that.
Keep losing me.
Could
Okay,
you
when I was over there, we have
close the windows that are
what they
open?
call northeast part of Saudi Arabia.
Philip, can you close
And,
those extra windows because you got
So
the
one day can you hear me?
turn off the
Yeah,
other.
We keep fading out.
You got to close your other windows.
I
If
got
you
my-
go to StreamYard, close out YouTube.
Hold on, I turned the TV on. I
Okay.
had you guys on TV. Okay, so I was in the northeast Saudi Arabia. We were 20 miles from Kuwait City. All right. And this young guy who was going to transfer. And so I took him on a ride in a water truck. And we're going to get water to this base. And so we get behind this truck, and I said, watch it, I'll show you how they do it in Saudi Arabia. I mean, in Sicily. So I passed this truck, and we're doing about 75 miles an hour, and we passed this truck. It was funny as heck. This kid looks at me, he's hitting his fist up against the leg on top of the leg on the truck and everything. And he said, I said, that's for you transferring. I give you a thing to go away. I ran somebody off the road. I thought I was going to get in trouble, but
Yeah.
never got in trouble. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. We that was the hard. That was
See
the
why they
hard,
do it in Sicily over there. If you
Yeah,
are like
you're
in the
in the
middle of if you're in the, if you pass somebody and you're in the middle of that truck, that car, you have the right of way. Everybody else has to get out of your way.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, the rule over there is the biggest truck has the right of way. So yeah, but I would tell
It
you
was a
that
big truck.
when
It was
you're
a
over
big truck
there
I was
in
passing.
the desert and you're driving around and you've got so much dust and sand going, and then your intervals get farther and farther apart, and then you're just like, because you had the sand goggles on when you're in a tracked vehicle and stuff. It was the TC, and you had those green sand goggles, and it was just like you were going like this, like windshield. I don't know what that is there, Philip. That's really loud. But we were choking. I mean, and when I talked earlier about sand boogies, when you've got dust and sand up your nose, that, and then it hardens because everything hardens over there. It was horrible. And it's like between 110 and 130 degrees every day. And then at night, you freeze your butt off, you know? And a lot of people weren't used to that. I'm from Arizona, and I know it gets cold in the desert at night, at certain times of the year. There's frost on the cactus. And over there, it was no different. And then, of course, when the sandstorm came, we had a haboob when we were there the second time. And a haboob is a big wall. Have you ever seen The Mummy, where they had big wall of the sandstorm was coming across the desert?
Oh, I've seen them in real life.
When you see that wall, because in Arizona we'd have those every once in a while, so I knew what it was, and I always carried a handkerchief around, and I'd soak that with water when I seen it coming, and I would just wrap my whole face in that thing and breathe through the wet cloth. It didn't stay didn't stay wet very long. But that sand messed up a lot of people breathing that real fine powder sand in your lungs and stuff like that. That was some crazy stuff.
When we decided, we were going to cross LD, leaving Kuwait into Iraq, of course, it's always at night. So, and being a driver at the time, you're wearing the NVGs. Well, the fun part about wearing NVGs, you don't have depth perception.
Yeah.
You can't see what's going on. Well, We head out on the convoy, and luckily there was like these IR blinkers. They made everybody tape to the tip of the antennas, right?
Yeah.
That was the only way, because if you traveled during the day, the dust cloud kicked up from all the vehicles in front of you, you couldn't see anything. So the best way to move was at night, and you follow the IR blinker. Don't worry about the path in front of you. Just follow that. Well, we kept going. Well, we were about 48 hours in, nonstop. You know, some add halts, that kind of stuff, but it was never a, hey, we're going to stop and sleep. It's, we're stopped because they're checking something out, or, you know, the whole slinky effect of a convoy. We'd stopped at one point at about 48 hours in, and I literally fell asleep at the wheel. I mean, I hadn't slept. We're going for 40 hours straight. And my A driver over there, the old comm chief, he'd done passed out, and the kid in the back, I don't think he was ever awake for any of it.
Right.
And I'd fallen asleep, not realizing it, and I woke up, and I don't know how long I slept. It must have been a while, but all of a sudden I wake up and I look over, oh, comm chief's asleep. I slap him. I'm like, hey, where are we supposed to be going? And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, that vehicle that was in front of us is no longer in front of us, but I see all these blinking lights on the horizon. Which one do I choose? And so we kind of sat there a minute and watching the direction of the blinking lights, and he's like, go that way. And I'm like, okay, we'll catch up. And, you know, so we keep marching. We're moving on. Daylight comes in. Well, I don't know. We were day 4 or 5 into this thing. Now, mind you, we've been eating MREs. That's it. We're still wearing mop gear because we never know. From Desert Storm, they learned the lesson. Hey, stay in mop gear. You know, the lowest but the highest level you can be in. Like, so we're all in it. And I'm like, I'm not trying to go to the bathroom. We'll stop at an add a halt. Hey, I'll go water a tire, but number 2s are out of the question. I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not. But every add a halt you've seen it. It was like cockroaches. Dudes jumped out of vehicles and they're just sitting or squatting wherever they could. It's open desert. You get no private.
Yeah.
So we're probably day 5 or 6, and all of a sudden here comes a sandstorm. And I'm like, oh, man, I've done training in 29 Palms. I've seen the sandstorms. This is not going to be good. Like, and I think this thing lasted almost 2 days.
Yeah.
Just solid orange. And we were stuck because of the sandstorm. The visibility was down. We weren't moving anywhere. And finally it hit. And I'm like, fellas, I'm sorry. I can't wait any longer. I've been holding this probably 5-6 days now. Give me the ammo can. It's time to get her done. And yeah, had to crawl up in the back of the Humvee. Had the guy that was normally in the back in the front. Of course, I think both of them were trying to take turns who was gonna vomit.
Yeah.
Because it was like it was bad. But it seemed like everybody around that time, they called it Saddam's revenge. Because it didn't matter. You were not holding your bowels in at all. And it was not. I would have rather went back to burning the shit because it smelled better than what was coming out of our bodies at that point.
Yeah. Hey, but I'm going to tell you something. The thing that I did, I mean, I'm sitting there. We had all these stories. You know, we're learning all the flashcards of all the vehicles and all this stuff, so you could identify on and on and on. And then we learned about the Republican Guard and how fierce they were, all these things. And then we LD'd, and we're racing, because before we LD'd, and my thought is we were waiting on these dozer teams, and I met a guy later. He was in 52nd Heavy Junk, and it's a blade battalion, and they have dozers, track dozers that were probably Oh, the width on those dozer blades had to be 15, 20 foot wide. I mean, they are massive dozers that the Army has. And they were cutting lanes across the desert. And then they were dropping off, depending on what your color was. And they said, keep the white barrels. I know in our lane, because we were right next to the Syrians. And you're figuring there's over 500,000 soldiers in that KKMC area, right? Stretched across the desert. And we had white barrels, I think white barrels with red dots around the center of it. And we were supposed to keep those on our right side and just keep going. And I'm going to tell you something. These blade guys, they built highways across that freaking desert. And if there was like a wadi, which is like a water creek or an dip, they were filling those things in so the tanks out front could just haul ass and get to the LD. But we did all that stuff. We heard all the war stories about the Republican Guard, how fierce these guys were. They were desert warriors and yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, you seen people coming out of the ground. They heard this coming, right? They heard it coming. All these vehicles, tanks, everything was hauling ass across the desert. All of a sudden, you seen people stand up, and they were putting their hands in the air. And one guy was waving a white pair of tidy whities in the air like this. And you had to slow down and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. This wasn't on the battle plan, you know? And all of a sudden, you go by there and they told us, somebody said, you got any zip ties? I said, I ain't got no freaking, what am I going to use a zip tie for? And they said, just zip tie their hands and give us a grid coordinates off your plugger so we can send people out there to pick these people up. Well, I'm going to tell you something. When you see thousands of people coming out of the ground, like, you know, Mad Max, they're coming out of the freaking ground and giving up.
Yeah.
It was insane how many people.
You see this little dot. It's about that big when you see it, and you don't know what it is. Yeah. And then, you know, you're traveling, and of course they're walking, and all of a sudden they get close enough, and you can get enough optics on them to know that that's people walking at you by the hundreds, and they're all just because, once again, hey, why?
At first you go, hey, why are these guys running at all these tracked vehicles? You know, and they weren't running; they were just coming out of the ground, giving up. Because they've been sitting out there forever, starving to death.
Food, no resupply,
no replenishing anything, and they know if they left, they'd be executed. And then those poor freaking the MPs, the duty, because they weren't ready for 100,000 people to give up, and you have to move those guys and create basically POW camps for all these people. So they were taking rope and all kinds of stuff and zip tying their hands and running a rope between their arms, you know, and they were all walking across the desert. When we were coming back one time, I seen all these guys and I said, and the line was up and over all the sand and stuff. I go, holy smokes. And I couldn't believe how fast that thing began and it was over. Because we went from where we were, we kept going. They said, keep going. We got somewhere and they told everybody to, you know, stop in place, give us your grid coordinate off your plugger and stuff like that. And we stopped there. And then the next morning when the sun started coming up, I could finally see stuff. And I see this gigantic black looking building in the middle of freaking nowhere, and there's a river in front of us. And I didn't know that was some kind of whatever it was. Right on, we were at the Tigris River. I'm like going, what the hell? And then of course the chaplain came over later and he goes, yeah, and on the other side is the Euphrates River, and this is where life began, or King Solomon's temple and all this. I'm going, what is all this stuff? And where did they get the black stone to make this gigantic looking monument building in the middle of nowhere? Because the planes had already come over and took out every freaking bridge. There wasn't a bridge on those rivers to save anything. And so we just stopped there, and I'm just like going, I'll never see this again in my life. And it was insane how fast it started, how fast it ended. And the miles that we put on with no resistance whatsoever. Just people. The only reason we had to stop is people, like I said, were coming out of these foxholes, out of the sand, and just giving up and wanting food and water. Of course, you want to go like this and say, "Hey, we've already got all your weapons and we've patted you down and all that stuff, and we zip tied your hands." But they were begging for water because these guys were half dead out there. Yeah. They weren't ready to fight. Because we were there in August and we didn't LD until January something. And these guys have been out in the desert the whole freaking time. Holy smokes. And what a humanitarian problem you have on your hand that nobody briefed you on, because nobody thought
that was a big debate when we came in. Of course, once again, a lot like, what you went through in Saudi is what we did in 2003. Of going in to get to Baghdad. We actually got stopped for 2 days on the road march up beyond the sandstorm. Was we ran out of fuel. They couldn't get the fuel trucks up to us fast enough to be able to supply the fuel. So you're kind of stuck in position of where you're going to go, like how far you can go and when can they get you fuel to you. But every time we stopped, it was that way. We were just getting hundreds of them coming in, and they predicted so much of this tank-on-tank battles.
Yeah.
Not a one. Like, they gave up. Because they didn't have the food, they didn't have the supplies, they had no direction. They were said, hey, sit here and fight till the end of your day. And they're like, I've got more time left in me. I don't want to really fight that bad.
Yeah.
And now I'm hungry. So give us some food. And then we finally pull into Baghdad, and, there was a few engagements on the way up with some diehards, but nothing obviously that we couldn't handle. So we just kept pushing through. Hey, man, that's easy. We'll take them out. And then get up to Baghdad, and then we're sitting there waiting. We're like, all right, what's next? Like, we did what you wanted us to do. We cleared the route. We've got Baghdad. And they had no further word. They didn't expect us to get there as fast as we did.
Yeah.
And now we're standing there waiting. Well, then they wanted to convert us. And for the mentality of a Marine, where you shoot first, ask questions later. We're going in, like, our old job and mission as the Marine Corps is just to go in and F stuff up. We're going to clear it. We're going to blow them up. We're not there to maintain it. That's what the Army is for. Like, they've got bigger forces. They've got better resources. We go in and clear it, make it safe long enough for somebody to come in and put permanent security. Well, then they start talking, well, we're going to turn you guys from doing this, and we're going to go into humanitarian missions.
Yeah.
What do you mean humanitarian missions? Well, we got to go win the hearts and the minds of the people. Yeah, we're not the crowd you want doing that. Like, we don't ask. Like, you're not wearing our uniform. You're going down. We're going to keep moving. And it became a big discussion amongst everybody within the units and that was on the ground, because how do you change that mentality? Especially for guys like, I mean, for me, I was blessed that my brain doesn't like catch on to the negative and hold on to it. Type stuff. So I can switch modes, but a lot of guys, once they got into that first engagement, it was that 1,000-yard stare.
Right.
They weren't. That's all. They might as well have been a horse with blinders. That's all they could see was like, oh, not wearing my uniform. You could not take a force the size that we had going into there, and do what we did, and then say, well, now we need to win their hearts and minds.
Yeah, because we're not good at peacekeeping.
No, it's not.
I learned that in Bosnia.
Yeah,
we're not good at it.
I mean, for the sake of our channel and not YouTube blasting us, I won't tell you what we do with hearts and minds, but it's not win them. It's one of those that we go in and do our job. Hey, you want us to clear this area, and the same thing happened in Afghanistan when I went in 2008. Was, hey, 7 to 10 days, you're going to go in. Well, within 48 hours, we had the route cleared, and we're sitting there waiting like, hey, send your convoy you wanted. We're good. Right. And they're like, well, change of plans. And 4.5 months later, we made it back to, where we were supposed to be. Of course, we left with 10 days worth of supplies. And so that made things.
And I will tell you the most frustrating thing when I was there, any place I've ever been deployed to, is the massive amounts of changes to the ROI, rules of engagement.
Oh, yeah.
It drives soldiers insane.
Yeah.
I know incidences where people were being shot at and then because of the ROI, asking to send up permission to return fire. And stuff like that. When you handcuff, if you see, here's one thing that you got to understand. Your whole job in life is to train to kill somebody else. Okay, different weapon systems, all kinds of stuff. Your job is to train to kill other people and let them be dead heroes and not get killed. And when you have, and military people don't come up with all this stuff. It's a bunch of civilians dictating the ROIs for the country, what's humane, what's not, when can you fire, do you have to actually get hit before you can return fire, or you got to do everything to get as small as you can, and yada, yada, yada. And that happened in Iraq. That happened in Bosnia. That happened in Afghanistan. The only place that it was, if you got fired upon, I mean, because I've had relatives, they were in Vietnam, and they just light up the jungle. Okay. But that was a totally different fought war than in deserts and stuff like that. Because we went to Thailand, and if Vietnam was anything like Thailand, I don't know how some of our men and women over there did not go crazy because of the heat and the humidity and all that stuff in the jungle. But that's for another day. But getting back to the ROI, when it was like somebody was up there playing games, and I mean, I can't remember how many different changes, situational, this and that, and you're supposed to keep all that. And when you're getting fired upon, all you in your brain is your training kicks in, and all you want to do is stop whatever's firing at you.
Right.
Okay. And then later on, they go, well, wait a minute, it was small arms fire, and you released, 15 203s, and you destroyed buildings and You did all this stuff. I'm sorry. Now, then they're going to try to, and people did go to jail, in the history because you didn't fight the way they told you to fight,
Well,
and then
that was the exact same thing that happened when we went to Afghanistan the first time. It was a 7 to 10 day mission. And so we went ahead and prepared ourselves with food, chow, water, ammo for 10 days. Knowing, hey, we're gonna run worst case scenario. Well, we get out there. Well, we clear this route that they expected us to take like 3 or 4 days. We did it in 24, 36 hours. We had it cleared. Well, then they changed the ultimate mission. They no longer, once we got in there, they weren't going to send this convoy through. We only went in to do route clearance. We went in to clear a route, hold it so that a convoy could come through. We got in there and then they're like, we're not doing the convoy. Well, in the meantime, it's about a week to 2 weeks of time that we're not allowed to go into the village. We're only allowed to stay where we were at on this route. And yet we're receiving daily fire.
Yeah.
And we couldn't re-engage. All we could do when we radioed up was, because of the ROE they had at the time, was hold in place, hunker down. If you would just let us go in, well, then they finally gave us clearance to go in and set closer defensive positions. But the weapon systems, like the biggest weapon system that we had in our platoon was we had 2 gun trucks that had 50 cals.
Yeah.
They're not going through. A 50 cal is not going through a 2-foot dirt wall, the mud walls that they built all the compounds out of. You're not getting a 50 cal at 100 yards or more range going through 2 feet of dirt. It's not happening. But we weren't allowed to launch anything larger than the 50 cal. And we're like, okay, fine. Send us some, mortars, send us something. Give us some sort of support because this is daily over here.
Right.
And it wasn't until we had a scout platoon come down and one of their gun trucks had a Mark 19. For a lot of you don't know, Mark 19, oh yeah, that's the stiffy maker right there. Automatic. Hey, it's a machine gun.
Launcher, just boom, 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 boom.
Grenades, just like, yeah. Well, they had a Mark 19 on one of their gun trucks, and he came in and he said, "Hey, I don't have any rules. What are you guys having an issue with?" And we said, "Hey, this spot right over here, we can't reach it, and we're not allowed to go infiltrate over there. We have to stay where we're at. This is the closest we're allowed to go." And he's like, "Okay, cool. Point my truck where you need it to be." Well, it just so happened it was right next to my gun truck. And I said, "You pull up next to this, let her rip." And leveled it. And we never got any more. We never got no more pop shots from that spot. And it leveled it. Now, the saddest part of that whole thing was not only did we just spend 2 weeks of having our hands tied, not being able to defend ourselves, we just sit there and take it, was a week after that happened, we went in there and yes, Don, happiness is a belt-fed weapon. The amount of money that all of a sudden they sent the what are they, the money guys that come out, the S shops. They came out, and the amount of money we paid to these villagers for the damage that was done, which I get it. If they were innocents, all right. But you couldn't have bought my property for, I mean, they gave out more money. I could have bought 10 of my properties for what they paid for one little hut over there. Like, they came out with briefcases and duffel bags of cash and just started handing it to them to help them rebuild their community. And I couldn't see it. I'm like, there's no way. Like, these guys just spent 2 weeks firing whatever they could get their hands on at us. So we leveled it, and now we're paying 5 times what it was worth to rebuild it.
Now I want to make a correction because I got my two things mixed up. I said an ROI. A ROI is my civilian life, which is return on investment. And then my ROE is the military side, which are rules of engagement. Okay.
We knew you meant ROE, Mike.
But
you
I'm
didn't
gonna
have your
tell you
good
something.
ears in. This
I
whole
did.
double retirement, we let it slip.
Yeah. But I will tell you that when we went back the second time, I went back with 11th ACR, and we were at Camp Doha in Kuwait. And of course, Dynacor was there, and units left their equipment down there, and they went back and they drew new equipment in Germany and in the States and stuff like that. So they had this whole fleet of tanks and APCs and every vehicle that you can think of that's in a division's TO&E. And when units rotated in for the no-fly zone and stuff like that, you would draw all your equipment out of there, so the government wasn't shipping new equipment overseas and stuff like that every single time a new unit deployed. So you picked up everybody's ash and trash and stuff like that. And after a while, the stuff just got wore out. So I was with 11th ACR. We went back down there. We were at Doha, and we had units that would deploy out of Doha and go to the outlying base camps along the Iraqi border outside of Kuwait. And then we built an artillery range. We built all kinds of stuff out there. And they're still rotating and doing all that kind of stuff over the years. Well, when they go out, they would road march all the stuff out there and then bring stuff back. And the artillery guys came back in, and they came back, were on the wash rack. And once you get done washing, when you come in the back gate of Doha, you'd wash everything, and then you'd put it in one of the motor pools by vehicle types and stuff like that. So they're on the wash rack, and all of a sudden I was basically across the street about 200 yards away from the wash rack. That's where we had all our Blackhawks and the Apaches. All that stuff was over in this area over here. Dynacor was behind us, and then the wash rack was there. And they started washing the vehicles. All of a sudden, I heard this boom, and I mean the little shed the house thing that we had as a headquarters for the aviation. I mean, it actually moved the building on the tarmac, right? It moved it. I'm going, whoa, what the heck? And all of a sudden another one went and another one went. And I said, man, I got to get out of this building. And I went outside, and I'm going like this, and I see this big plume of smoke and everything.
Keep going.
And
I'll be right back.
kept going. What happened is they came into the wash rack, and they were spraying down, and they have all the powder bags, they have all that stuff for the artillery pieces. And it wasn't actually the artillery piece. It was, I call it a turtle. It's the ammo hauler that was there, and they were washing it down. They had an electrical fire inside that thing, and it had 96 rounds inside, because you have to stop off at the ammo supply point, because when you go out there, you go to gunnery and you do all this stuff. And they just topped off everything, and they were washing it down, had electrical fire. And I mean, it blew that base camp up. All the powder bags, all the artillery, all the rounds, and all that stuff, the bags would blow up and shoot these 155 rounds out of there, and it was just like a freaking nightmare. And then there was fuel everywhere. They were hitting other vehicles that were in other parking areas and motor pools and stuff like that. And then it punctured a fuel tank, a 5,000 gallon fuel tank. Some shrapnel did, and of I think it was diesel. Yeah, it was diesel, and it started leaking. And then right across the street from that were the engineers, and the engineers already had their whole basic load of Miclics that they have loaded on their vehicle, stuff like that. And that's when everybody's pucker factor went up. And we, at first, everybody thought we were coming under fire, and it was that one vehicle. Then it hit another, hit another ammo hauler. That one started going off, and I mean, it went crazy. And we lost a couple of helicopters from shrapnel just ripping through those. But then I got on the handheld radio because where my pilots were, they were down the road and they just came running. And when you start up a helicopter, you have to go through a whole check plan. But when it's an emergency, it is start the rotors, get it. And I mean, those guys, I seen blades skip off the tarmac. They pulled that so hard and they just like slingshot it off the ground to get the heck out of it to save those helicopters and stuff. And that was the worst accident because of mechanical failure. And it just so happened to be on an ammo hauler carrying 155 rounds or 109 rounds or whatever they were back in the day. And I mean, the cleanup was extensive. Some of the rounds carried those little magnetic anti-personnel mines, and they were everywhere, right? They were everywhere.
Yeah.
And the engineers had to suit up in the Scheibel suits, and they were going out there, and they have this, it's like a wax, like paraffin wax or something like that. And what they did is they constructed these big, long poles, and they would take it because they had to use wooden poles, and they formed a wooden cup on the end of it, and they'd fill it up with this paraffin stuff, and they would walk and they would pour it over the landmine and seal it. Then they'd throw it on a truck after it dried because that magnetic thing wasn't working anymore when they sealed it and shit. And so they had to do all that stuff. And then you had EOD come in, and they were taking the rounds that didn't go off, but they were damaged stuff, and they were taking them outside the gate to this big hole that the engineers dug, and they were setting them in there, taking them off the truck. And they had some engineers helping them. And so it was like one engineer, one EOD guy, and they were offloading it. And one of the guys tripped and dropped it, and there was an explosion. And the guy in the tower that wrote his statement said they were standing there and then they were gone. They just vaporized at ground zero. And I'm just going, holy, because it'd been several days, and then all of a sudden that went off. And of course, first thing you do is you try to hug the earth as close as you can, looking for your mask and all your other stuff inside where you were staying, because Doha was a grain storage area for the Kuwaitis. And we moved out all the feed. We had to clean out all the buildings. And then York came in and shipped all these air conditioning units and heating units. And the engineers welded platforms to put these things on. And we spent like 90 days getting this building all these buildings ready, and then people rotate in and out of there and stuff like that. But that was
I see
the
that was
devastating part.
that was one of the big differences. And I've been watching between David and Denise talking about, back, like Denise was in Doha in 2003 doing the washdowns. But the funny thing was, I remember being over there in 03. I never made it to Doha itself. They kept us in like, it was called Camp Fox, but we were around Kuwait City, or the port of Kuwait. And that was the one thing that blew my mind when we got back. So we get all the way to Baghdad, driving the tanks and all the vehicles up there, and then they brought in the National Guard with the big het trailers, because they didn't want us to drive the tanks back. It was going to cost them too much in fuel. So they brought the big het trailers, these huge semis with flatbeds, to load the tanks on, and they drove us back to Kuwait. And we got back, and they had us start doing some washdown stuff. And I'd heard the stories, obviously, you guys had went through it, where they had to like Uber wash every one of these vehicles through multiple processes to bring them back. Not one vehicle or piece of equipment that we took to Iraq came back with us. We left every bit of it over there, other than like our personal gear and weapons. Those had to be ultra cleaned. But when it came to any of the tanks, Humvees, any of that equipment, none of that actually returned back to the States, because they're like, the cleaning and customs process is
crazy.
Yeah, they're like, it's not worth it for us to try to bring that stuff back. But I'd heard the horror stories of doing the wash racks, trying to get through customs to bring the stuff back. And I was fully prepared in my brain when we came back to Kuwait that that's what we were going to do. And they're like, nope, stage them over here. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, we got notice. All right, well, clean all your personal effects and go through everything and do the customs checks. And we flew back home. But I think that was the benefit of being part of a tank unit, was it was so expensive to run the tanks that we were the last ones. We were the last ones to come into the theater. We were the last planes to land coming in, and we were one of the first ones going out, because they're like, y'all are way too expensive to run. We're not doing this. Like, you're looking at what, 500 to 600 gallons a day of fuel just to run one. And so I think in 03 I spent 4 or 5 months. I think 5 months. It was one of my shortest ones going in. But then that difference of coming back, and Denise, talking about R&R, that wasn't a thing on my deployments. And that's the difference on the Marine Corps, was we only did typically 6-month deployments. That blew my mind when I talked to my uncle, who was on earlier, and then his son, my cousin, that were both Army at the time. And they're like, oh, well, no, the Army does 1-year deployments. And I'm like, what? No, like, I made the right decision. I want these 6-month, and we were there for a long time, 7 to 8 months.
I will tell you that on the second deployment to Iraq and Kuwait and Saudi, I did send some of my soldiers onto a thing they called the Love Boat. It was a big cruise liner that they put out there, and so many soldiers would go out to the thing, and they would drink and be happy and do all their thing out there. The only break I had on any of the deployments was my squadron commander told me, he came to me, he said, Mike, he goes, you've sent all your people, you need to take a break, get on that Black Hawk there. It's going to Bahrain, or not Bahrain, wherever Cobalt Towers is, Riyadh. You need to go there. I want you to stay there for 2 days, go to the housing thing. They'll put you up in one of the towers and get you a hot meal, shower up, relax a little bit, and then come back with the team that comes back, because we were running supply runs back and forth in Blackhawks and stuff. He goes, but when you come back, you need to go over here and see this guy, and he's got about 16 cases of
David.
watermelons, and I want you to bring them watermelons back. So I said, okay. And so we had like 3 Blackhawks, and we had watermelons stacked up in the Blackhawks and stuff. We took the seats out and we flew down there. And so there was a USO set up there, because that's where Mark from Two Old People on a Couch, where he spent his deployment, was at the air base there. And went to the USO, and I said, I'm going back to Doha. Do you got anything going that way? We have a little bit of room. And she gave me these boxes. And we threw the boxes. I said, man, these are freaking heavy. And she goes, they're baseball cards. I said, what? She goes, yeah, they're specially made for, soldiers and stuff. So while we were flying, I opened up a box of them, and there were 16 boxes of these Topps Desert Storm baseball cards, and they were camouflaged and all that stuff, and
with the chocolate chips. I think I've seen them actually.
And I go, huh? And so when we got back, I said, man, because I used to collect baseball cards. So I took 2 cases of them and I stuck them in my flight bag and turned all the other ones. He goes, why is this one open? I said, I don't know. First sergeant, they just gave it to me that way, right? And they opened. He goes, oh man, these are cool. And the first thing the first sergeant does, he goes, I'm taking one. My kid collects these, and he put it away. And so I remember that, bringing back the watermelon. That was my only R&R there. They did have, like I said, the Love Boat, and it wasn't because we deployed, we came back, and then we went back again for 6 months, and then they started the year deployment stuff and things like that. But yeah, that was the only thing I heard of, was the Love Boat, and a lot of crazy stuff went on there when you put boys and girls on a cruise ship and introduce liquor after being deployed and stuff like that. It went crazy. But yeah. So hey guys,
biggest memory, and now that you mention it, because I couldn't remember until we started talking about it tonight, was Camp Fox. I think it was right out the port of Kuwait or something.
Yeah.
I couldn't give you the actual location of where it was, but we were there. But it was evidently a ride from Camp Fox to Doha.
Yeah.
And we had some supply guys, some S4 guys they went daily from Doha back and forth.
Right.
So we're thinking, hey, that must be a quick trip. And we weren't allowed to go back to Doha. Like we had to stay there. And we knew the supply guy, and he's like, hey man, what can we, Doha's got everything. What do you guys want? And we're like, what's even at Doha? Like, what do we ask you for to bring us back? And he's like, he started rambling off all this stuff, and kind of a PX or BX, whatever they called it. And then he mentioned Burger King. That's it. That's what you bring us Burger King. Like, we don't care what you bring back. You bring us Burger King. And I'll tell you, that was the best tasting, worst Whopper I've had in my life.
There you go.
Because it made it the ride back from that stuff. I don't know where he stored it. It somehow was cold by the time we got it.
Oh, of course.
And it was horrible by any normal standards. It was horrible, and everyone would be like, "Nope, I'm throwing it away. I'm not eating it." We ate it up like it was the best feast you ever had, and I'm like, I can't even be mad about eating this horrible Whopper. But that was the only non-MRE food that we'd had for that whole time.
I will tell you that they didn't have Burger King when I was there. That came years later.
Yeah.
At Doha, they had this trailer, and there was a vendor that worked for the PX, and they ran this trailer, and it was called the Wolf Burger Stand. Right? AFIS brought it in on a boat, and they hauled it there, and they set it up, and some Kuwaitis were actually running, because that's who they had to hire.
Mm-hmm.
All their management staff was U.S., but the workers weren't, and they would locally buy everything that was sold out of there at the beginning, and then later on, I found out. I said, well, why is this meat gray? Are they boiling this stuff? What are they doing? Because you didn't see no burn marks or nothing like that on it. I'm thinking, what the heck? And then later on, it was like 2 weeks later, we went over there, and I said, it wasn't the best tasting, but I was tired of eating MREs and eating the same thing in the little chow hall that they set up and stuff like that. And the closed till further notice, AFIS staff AFIS manager put the sign on there. And all of a sudden they said we had to line up over at the TMC, Troop Medical Center, and they had to draw blood from us. And they said, everybody. I'm going like, what the hell? All of a sudden, arbitrarily, everybody's got to give a vial of blood, and we were lined up. You had an appointment time for your unit to go there, and they had all these medics out there drawing blood from you. And come to find out, they were serving a combination of goat and camel meat burgers. Because I say, man, this don't taste like no beef, And at that time, I never ate a goat.
You said gray, and I thought goat, but it could have been dog or.
I'm like going, what the heck? And then all of a sudden they stopped serving sausages, these link sausages, and it didn't taste like sausage, like pig, because they don't eat pig over there.
Right.
And it was camel sausage, which is a big thing or whatever. I don't know. And we didn't get that no more because they didn't serve bacon because you couldn't bring it into the freaking country. And it was just, some of those little things that just popped in my head when you said Burger King. I remember the Wolf Burger Stand, you know. So, but guys, those are the stories from the desert. We'll do some more. We'll be talking other stories about Afghanistan. I was never there, so hopefully somebody that was in Afghanistan can come up and relay theirs with Jason, because he spent some time in Afghanistan. I just know the political side of withdrawal and all the stuff that went on over there. But in Bosnia, we'll talk about Bosnia and how that went. And guys, I'm going to tell you the just some weird stuff that just pops in your head when I just say those places. And then, of course, we're going to talk about Operation Provide Comfort. We'll do a series on that because I was at that one where Saddam Hussein gassed the Kurds. They went up into the Turkish mountains by the millions, and my unit was assigned because I was at air assault school in Germany, and we had to go down there and sling load food to feed millions of people 3 times a day. And we'll talk about that and funny things that happened there. It wasn't funny at the time, but when I think back on it, it's funny now. When they tell you don't drink the water, don't drink the water. If it don't go clack, 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 snap, don't drink it. And we'll be talking about stuff over as time goes on, and we'll bring those up again. But guys, we want to thank you guys for coming in. If you are a veteran, we want to thank you for your service. If you're a family member of a veteran or active duty, we want to thank you for your service in supporting our war fighters. And guys, we absolutely love you. And remember, be kind to one another, help somebody in need, and always, always thank a vet. Thanks for joining us, guys. God bless you. We love you, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.
See you guys. Hot bye.